Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of the Altengrad city from City Skylines. Today we will stay in the same part of the city where we built the train viaduct last time. We will continue filling the empty spots around the city center, and we will also start another really cool project, the old city walls. So let's get to it. As you can already tell, this episode 20, is not going to be the cinematic episode. I know that I promised it, but then I figured that the city is not exactly all that large to just showcase it in some just dedicated video. And I posted the vote in the community tab in this channel where I basically asked you if you think the same, and you guys did. So you voted that episode 20 should be just a building episode, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And we are probably going to do some cinematic episode when a large portion of the old town is finished. I would really like to do the switch for the 1930s. From the 20s that we are currently in. I'm not sure if the cinematic episode is going to be exactly when we are going to end the 20s, because I think I would rather do the advance a bit faster than the cinematic showcase, because I do want to start putting some more modern 30s buildings into the city before I can call this, let's say, downtown area of the city completely finished. And when that's finished, then I'll probably do the cinematic episode then, all right? So anyway, let's now talk about what's going to happen in today's episode and what's already happening. So I decided that we are finally going to do some city walls. We already created the gates for the really old walls, the medieval walls, right around the oldest parts of the city. But we didn't really build any remnants of the old walls. Now, these kinds of walls, you can already see that these are the modern variants built pretty much after the medieval ages, because, you know, gunpowder and just guns in general were starting to be very common, and the old medieval walls were just not really up to the task of defending any kind of fortifications that needed to be fortified. Cities, for example, or kinds of forts and structures like that. So Altengrad, because of its position, it definitely required some fortification, some modern fortification, so it could defend itself against the enemies. Now, unfortunately, Altengrad was a really big city already when these walls started to appear around it, and the city was already expanding past the walls as well. Obviously not with the modern houses, big houses, but only some like wooden smaller houses, probably for the poorer people who couldn't just afford living inside the very crowded downtown already at that point. Now, the city walls, I'm thinking, for Altengrad were not really finished 100%. They were built a very long time, for a very long time, and they were never really finished all around the city how they should have been finished. There were many important military structures just missing, and over the course of some centuries, it was proven that a city of this size was just not easily defendable, and these walls, they definitely helped, but it was still a very, very difficult task to protect the entire city from some attacking armies, and the city walls just didn't prove all that effective. Now, when we are going to fast forward into some maybe early 18th, probably 19th century, late 18th century, the city started to grow quite a lot, and it needed to grow even past the old city walls that we have over here. So the walls really started to lose its importance, because suddenly they were pretty much in the middle of the city and no longer on the sides of it. So it was very soon after this when the rulers of Altengrad just decided that the city is not really going to have its walls, and they are just going to be slowly demolished. So right here in the 1920s, we already have just a couple of these bastions and curtain walls left, and they are mostly not used for military purposes at all. They are just used for some warehouses, maybe just civilian use, and even the gates are just not functioning. In some places, the gates for the fortresses were just completely torn down because the roads going into the city just needed to be larger. Also because of the tracks, for the train tracks, for example, they needed to cut some walls in some places to allow the trains to enter the city, and of course for wider roads, for example, even tram roads and stuff like that. Now, there are some military structures still remaining as part of this old fortification, but they are not exactly all that necessary, and they are probably going to be torn down in the course of time. But I'm not going to do it in today's episode. In today's episode, it's going to be just about the outline of the wall. And in the next episode, we are going to do the inside of the wall, together with some old military structures like barracks and all that. And we are just going to create not so nice looking places inside of these walls, where there are going to be just some really old buildings, like I say, some old barracks maybe. And when we're going to advance in time, the walls are just going to be kind of a problem when it comes to the expansion of the city and just renovations of some parts of the city. All right. So I guess that was some sort of a background for these walls and to justify having these walls in this part of the city. It's probably not the only place of the city where I'm going to build some of these old fortifications. I'm thinking that on the other side of the river, especially on that little peninsula, I'm probably going to build some forts or maybe some more fortifications, probably closer to the downtown, because the biggest part of the city is probably on this side of the river. So it's definitely not the last time we are building some of these fortifications, okay? Now, like I say, so in this time period, the walls are not used anymore, and they are mostly converted for civilian use. And all around the walls, we are just going to get some just civilian structures and decorations that are definitely that were not present when this entire system was built. Now, right past the walls, we are going to build this rather modern-ish square, which is again going to be an intersection for trams. It's going to have some slightly more modern buildings, maybe built very recently, maybe like 10, 20 years ago. Well, not exactly these that I'm building in here, but in that square where I'm doing that intersection for the trams. As you can see, I'm no longer using that much cobblestone on some of these roads. In some parts, I'm just using the asphalt because at this time period, it was definitely starting to show on some of these surfaces, so it's definitely justified. Now, I also decided that in this portion of the old walls, I'm going to build this little pond. It may or may not have been here when the walls were first built, but I just felt like it's a nice detail to put in here. And the rest of the places around the city walls, the remnants of the still standing city walls, are probably just going to be like a slightly excavated places with just some walk paths for pedestrians and basically converted into some parks, right? So buildings are not going to be built all the way towards the walls in some of these places, but rather some distance away from them, so that there's just some more just open space around the walls, so that the walls are going to be a bit more outlined, I guess, with those green areas. Okay. So it's going to be also filling a lot of these residential blocks. Like I said in the previous episodes, I'm going to be building some projects, for the main focus of the episode, and then obviously just filling a lot of the neighboring blocks with some buildings. So that's exactly what I'm doing in today's episode as well, and I'm actually skipping a lot of that in the time lapse. So in the cinematics at the end of today's episode, as usual, we will see just a finished thing, and there's probably going to be some blocks probably further towards the downtown just completely finished. So even in the next episode, when I'm going to be just continuing working on these walls, I will definitely finish some more of these blocks, and we are just slowly going to continue with the entire completion of this downtown area. And after that is done, I'm probably going to do the cinematic episode. Okay. Now, this portion of the walls, this area where the bastions are just connected with the curtain wall, it's just going to be filled with some warehouses or industrial looking buildings, because these places were completely empty. Obviously, they could not have been built because the walls would then not exactly function. The protective purpose would not exactly be fulfilled there. So until recently, those places were completely open, and maybe just a couple of years ago, some of these industrial buildings started appearing along the walls. But the city didn't exactly like it too much, so in most of these places we are just going to have some green patches around the walls, and maybe even these industrial areas are going to disappear in some time, together with, for example, the industrial areas underneath the viaduct and all those kinds of places. All right. So this is going to be another square. I'm going to be building quite a lot of squares actually in today's episode, at least 3 of them. I think I built a couple of squares in the previous episode as well, but these places just kind of feel very suited for some sort of squares. In here, this place was already open from the last episode, and just the shape of the blocks just felt fitting for some sort of a square. All right. So this is going to be the other side of the tracks that are going towards the viaduct, and in here there used to be the city walls. So all these blocks that I'm building right here are going to be very modern. They are probably not going to be older than maybe like 50 years already in this time period, or maybe even younger. And as you can see, I already placed a very big church in this area. Now, this block with the church definitely was not empty. This is exactly where the old walls used to be. But they got demolished recently, again, maybe 50 years ago or something like that. And the city just decided that they are going to build a church in this place and some sort of a square. I was searching for the workshop. I was searching in the workshop for some modern church that might have been built maybe in the early 20th century, and I just decided that I'm going to use some of the neo-Gothic churches. That this one is actually from Prague, which was even in real life built in the neo-Gothic style quite recently, relative to how it looks like, I guess. But that's kind of the point of the entire style, to just make it look like it was built a really long time ago, but it was not. And it's kind of obvious that it was not built a long time ago, because especially in this place in Altengrad, there used to be the city walls. So obviously the church could not have been there. And all this place is going to feel a bit more modern thanks to that, because this entire square is going to be very open. Obviously, these Gothic churches in the really old parts of town would usually be very crowded. There usually would be just buildings built right next to the churches, maybe even like touching it like wall to wall. But not in here, because the church was just built very recently. Therefore, they planned probably the entire neighborhood to just fit this entire place nicely. I was thinking that maybe this entire place, like these couple of blocks that I'm building in here, might have probably been built in one project or in one kind of a design. Right after the walls were torn down in this place, all these blocks just were built in one go, pretty much. All right, so now we are back with the other square, which is right next to the already standing walls, or just standing walls that we built with the pond. Now, this place I had to just fill with cobblestone and all that, and we are also going to build this park in here. Now, this place might have been flooded. It might have been part of some moat right next to the walls, but it was probably drained, or maybe it was never just filled with water. Maybe it's part of just some unfinished project of the fortification, and today it's just going to be converted into a park, like I said. I don't really want to make any kinds of buildings around these walls, again, because it's going to just feel much better to have the walls more open, because they are then going to be just more visible from some distance. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for. I want to have the walls in this part of the city more visible, just make them into a landmark of this entire neighborhood, let's call it. All right. So I only placed like this small building on the corner right there, which is looking very modern. So it kind of emphasizes the idea that just the walls are kind of in the way of the expansion of the city, and some of these buildings would really like to be built where the walls are, but unfortunately there's the walls. And like I said, maybe when we go into the future parts of the series, maybe some of these portions of the walls are going to be destroyed. I was thinking that this road that we are building in here might actually be some sort of might end up being some really important road, just entrance to the entire city from maybe like a highway or something. So the walls will probably have to be cut a bit more to just allow for like a wider street. Things like that might definitely appear here and there all around the city. So at this point, as you can see, it's just a straightforward detailing, putting just a lot of trees, because I really do want to put a lot of trees into these areas. I definitely need to figure out how am I going to start ending the city, basically, in these parts, because I'm still building these very dense blocks of buildings, but I will really need to sort out some places where I'm just going to start building some lower density buildings, maybe even like detached houses, but I actually don't have that many from the workshop, so it's going to be a bit difficult, I suppose. We are probably going to start building some modern quarters, modern neighborhoods, and maybe some like cemeteries and whatever, and that's probably going to serve as a nice end of the city as it is right now. And as you could have seen right on that square, I started putting some really modern buildings in there, so it's going to look like that square was probably reworked or just built entirely very, very recently. All right. Anyway, guys, so that's just going to be these last blocks that I'm going to place, and that's going to be all for today's episode. Like I said, we are going to continue with the walls next time, and we are going to do some military barracks inside of them and just continue filling all these blocks and working even around the railroad, because there are some places empty around it and all those kinds of things. All right, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching episode 20 of the Altengrad city, and that's going to be all. Enjoy the cinematics, guys. If you like this episode, then you can put a thumbs up underneath it. You can share the video with your friends if you feel like it, and also you can subscribe to the channel. Take care and goodbye.